Caught my wife with her boss, then I ruined them. Her wedding ring lay on the counter, cold and abandoned under the kitchen light. The house was empty. Isabelle wasn't coming home. She was in his arms, and that truth hit me like a freight train. If this story tears at your heart, smash that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to Viora for more unforgettable cheating stories that burn deep. I'm Spencer Vaughn, 47, a man who clawed his way up from nothing. I built Vaughn Solutions, my financial consulting firm, from a one-room office with a busted radiator to a seven-figure powerhouse in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't flash wealth, no penthouses or private jets. My pride is a '69 Mustang. I restored myself, parked in the garage of our Craftsman home in a quiet suburb. It's the kind of life you earn through grit, late nights poring over balance sheets, early mornings shaking hands on million-dollar deals. Steady, honest American. At the heart of it was Isabelle, my wife of 8 years. She's 35 with hazel eyes that flicker like a storm and a laugh that could melt steel. When we met at a bank gala, her wit matched her beauty. She was a marketing director at First Carolina Bank. Sharp, polished, the kind of woman who owned every room. We had no kids, just a rhythm that felt unbreakable. She'd sweep through the door at dusk, heels clicking, tossing her purse on the counter with a grin that said, "We're in this together." I'd pour bourbon, she'd sip Pinot, and we'd trade stories, her about outsmarting clients, me about wrestling numbers into submission. Nights ended on the couch, her head on my shoulder, some forgotten movie glowing in the dark. It wasn't Hollywood, but it was ours. I thought it was enough. Then the cracks came, subtle like a hairline fracture in glass. Her phone, once left open, now stayed face down, buzzing at odd hours. She'd slip outside for work calls, her voice a murmur, her excuses flimsy late meeting. She'd say her perfume heavier, her smile tighter. She'd come home at 9 p.m., then 10, blaming client dinners with a shrug. I'm not a suspicious man. I've closed deals on instinct and read people like ledgers, but I know when the numbers don't balance. And Isabelle was off by a mile. It started with her eyes. They used to lock onto mine, warm, alive. Now they darted away like she was hiding something behind them. I'd ask about her day, and she'd deflect, her laugh hollow. "Oh, same old bank drama," she'd say, changing the subject. I let it slide once, twice. But by the third time, I wasn't just her husband. I was a man watching his life unravel. If you're feeling Spencer's pain, stick with Viora. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and let's dive deeper into this betrayal. The first blow landed on a Wednesday night in November, the kind of night where the air bites and the windows shudder like they're bracing for bad news. I was in my study finalizing a merger plan for a client, a chain of auto shops teetering on bankruptcy. The numbers were stubborn, but I was stubborn too. Hunched over my desk, the glow of my laptop cutting through the dark. That's when I heard her. Isabelle's voice drifted from the living room, not her usual melody, but something sharper, like a blade slicing silk. She was on the phone, pacing, her words clipped and cold. "Tara, you don't understand." She said, her tone laced with venom. "Spencer's so wrapped up in his little empire, he wouldn't notice if I vanished for a weekend. He's safe. Boring, I'm drowning in his routine." My hand froze on the keyboard. Tara, her college friend, always stirring the pot. I leaned toward the door, the wind outside howling like it knew what was coming. Isabelle laughed, a cruel, jagged sound that didn't belong to the woman I married. "No, I'm serious. I need fire. Someone who gets me. Not a guy who lives for profit margins and steak dinners. Fire." The words seared into me, hot and final. I wanted to storm in, rip the phone from her hand, demand who this someone was. But I'm Spencer Vaughn. I don't break, I build. So I stayed still, my pulse hammering her words, carving wounds I couldn't see. She hung up her heels, clicking toward the kitchen, and I forced myself to breathe. I stepped out, leaning against the doorway, my voice steady as stone. "Who was that?" She didn't flinch. "Just Tara catching up," she said, pouring wine with a smile that was all teeth, no warmth. She slid a glass toward me, her eyes skimming past mine. "You want some?" "No," I said, my gaze dropping to her left hand. Her wedding ring was gone. She didn't notice me staring, just sipped her wine and turned away, humming like the world was still hers. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside her, her breathing soft, her body close, but untouchable. The storm outside raged, and inside me something broke loose. The next morning I didn't confront her. I investigated. I'm a man who reads patterns, cash flows, market trends, human behavior. Isabelle's patterns were screaming betrayal. Her phone was locked now, a new pin. I didn't know she'd leave for weekend meetings in dresses too bold for boardrooms. her lipstick a crimson slash I hadn't seen in years. I checked our joint bank account, something I hadn't done since we bought the house. The transactions hit like punches, $280 at the Regency Hotel in Raleigh. No business trip attached, $110 at Vino Noir, a downtown wine bar I'd never been to, $200 at a boutique called Silk and Lace Lingerie, the receipt confirmed. Each charge was a betrayal, small but sharp, piling up like debts she couldn't pay. I didn't say a word. I watched Friday night. She claimed another client dinner. She stood in front of the mirror, smoothing a black dress that clung to her like a second skin, her perfume heavy with jasmine. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing my cheek, her lips cold. I nodded, watched her taillights disappear down the street, and then I moved. Her laptop was on the dining table, unlocked, a rare mistake. Her work email was open, and a new message blinked, from Troy Wilkins, subject tonight. My blood turned to ice. I clicked the screen's glow harsh against my eyes. Isabelle, 8 p.m., the Oak Room. That dress is dangerous. Troy. No greeting, no explanation, just arrogance. The Oak Room was Charlotte's elite playground where bankers and lawyers traded secrets over $300 scotch. Troy Wilkins, I knew him. A 50-year-old executive at First Carolina Bank, Isabelle's boss. Silver hair, tailored suits, a smile that screamed self-importance. We'd met at a charity auction last spring, his handshake lingering, his eyes on Isabelle like she was a prize. I'd brushed it off. Then not now. I closed the laptop, my hands steady, but my chest on fire. She wasn't meeting a client. She was meeting him. I could have tailed her, made a scene in front of Charlotte's elite, but that's not who I am. I'm the guy who finds the truth and wields it like a weapon. So I called Claire, my assistant, sharper than a blade and loyal to a fault. "Claire," I said, my voice low. "I need security footage from the Oak Room tonight. Can you pull strings?" She didn't hesitate. "Give me 90 minutes, she said. "No questions, just results." That's why she's my right hand. By 10:30 p.m. my phone buzzed. A secure link from Claire. I poured a bourbon, sat in the dark, and clicked. The footage was grainy, the Oak Room's neon sign flickering in the frame. Then I saw her Isabelle black dress shimmering, laughing like she hadn't laughed with me in years. Troy Wilkins was beside her, his hand on her lower back guiding her to a sleek black BMW. She leaned into him, her smile alive, her body language a confession. They drove off and the footage looped back to nothing. I drained the glass, the burn in my throat, no match for the one in my gut. The house was silent, the storm outside gone, but inside me a war was starting. This wasn't just a cheating wife story. This was the moment I stopped being her husband and started being her reckoning. The bourbon glass sat empty on my desk, its amber residue catching the dim light of my study. Outside the Charlotte night was still, but inside me a plan was taking shape. Isabelle's laughter from that grainy footage looped in my mind, her head tilted back. Troy's hand on her waist, their ease a blade in my chest. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a man who'd built an empire on precision, and I'd dismantle theirs with the same. Monday morning I walked into Vaughn Solutions like it was any other day. My team buzzed around me, analysts crunching numbers, Claire fielding calls, but my focus was singular. Troy Wilkins wasn't just Isabelle's lover. He was a senior VP at First Carolina Bank, her boss and a key player in a $50 million merger I'd been consulting on for months. The irony was bitter. My firm was advising the bank on a deal that could make Troy a legend. Now it was my leverage. I called Claire into my office, shutting the door. "I need everything on Troy Wilkins," I said, voice low. "Financials, emails, meeting logs, anything that smells off." She raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. "How deep as it goes, and I need it yesterday." By noon, Claire slid a flash drive across my desk. "You're not gonna like this," she said. I plugged it in. Troy's financials were a mess of red flags, offshore accounts. Unexplained transfers, a shell company tied to a Cayman address. He was skimming from the merger, funneling funds to a private account. Sloppy, arrogant. But the real gut punch was an email chain between him and Isabelle buried in a deleted folder Claire had recovered. They weren't just lovers. They were partners. Spencer's clueless, Isabelle had written. "He's too busy playing hero with his clients to see what's under his nose. Once the merger closes, we're set," Troy's reply. "Keep him distracted, I'll handle the rest." My hands clenched, the screen blurring. She wasn't just cheating. She was using me, playing the loyal wife while plotting with Troy to cash out and vanish. I leaned back, the leather chair creaking, and let the anger settle into something colder. They thought I was predictable. They'd learn how wrong they were. I spent the afternoon dissecting the merger's financials. Troy had buried his tracks well, but not well enough. A series of consulting fees to his shell company, $200, 000, here $300, 000. There were siphoning funds meant for the deal. If exposed, it'd tank the merger and his career. I saved the evidence, encrypted it, and tucked it away. This wasn't about confrontation, it was about control. That night, Isabelle came home late, her perfume sharp, her smile rehearsed. "Rough day," she said, kicking off her heels. "The merger's killing me." I nodded, pouring her wine. "Troy keeping you busy." Her eyes flickered just for a second. "Yeah, he's intense. Big deal, must be." I said, my voice even. She didn't catch the edge. She sipped her wine oblivious while I watched her like a hawk. Every gesture, every lie fueled my resolve. She thought she was playing me. She had no idea I was rewriting the board. The next twist came Wednesday at a client dinner hosted by First Carolina. I'd been invited as a courtesy, my firm's role in the merger earning me a seat at the table. The venue was a rooftop steakhouse, all glass and steel. Charlotte's skyline glittering below. Troy was there holding court, his laugh booming as he clapped backs and poured scotch. Isabelle was at his side, radiant in emerald green, her arm brushing his too. Often I stood by the bar, bourbon in hand, invisible to them. They didn't know I was watching, cataloging every glance, every touch. Then I saw her father, Richard Harper, across the room. A retired banker, 70, with a handshake like iron and a stare that could freeze blood. He'd never liked me, called me small time when Isabelle and I got engaged. Now he was deep in conversation with Troy. Their heads bent, voices low. I edged closer, catching fragments. "Merger's tight," Richard said. "You sure about the numbers?" Troy smirked. "Rock solid, trust me." My gut twisted. Richard was no fool. He'd built First Carolina into a regional giant. If he was sniffing around, he suspected something. I filed it away, my mind racing. Was he in on Troy's scheme, or was he a wild card I could use? Halfway through dinner, Isabelle approached me, her smile a perfect mask. "You're quiet tonight," she said, touching my arm. "Everything okay?" "Just watching the room," I said, my eyes on hers. "Lots of players here." She laughed too bright. "Always working, huh?" She drifted back to Troy, her hand grazing his shoulder as she passed. I drained my bourbon, the burn steadying me. The game was shifting, and I needed to move faster. The next morning I met Claire at a diner across town, away from prying eyes. She slid me a new file paper, not digital. "You were right about Troy," she said. "But it's bigger. He's not just skimming. He's tied to a bigger player, someone offshore. And Isabelle's name is on the shell company's documents." I flipped through the pages, my jaw tight. Isabelle wasn't just complicit. She was neck-deep, a co-signer on accounts funneling millions. "How'd you get this?" I asked. "Don't ask," Claire said, sipping her coffee. "But there's more. Richard Harper's been asking questions about the merger quietly. He's not happy." I leaned back, the diner's hum fading. Richard, the old lion, was circling. If he uncovered Troy's scheme, it could blow up before I made my move. Or worse, he'd protect Isabelle, his only daughter, and pin it all on Troy. I needed to act before the board shifted again. That afternoon, I called an old contact, Nate Sullivan, a private investigator I'd used for corporate due diligence. Nate was 55, grizzled, the kind of guy who could find dirt on a saint. "I need eyes on Troy Wilkins," I said. "And Isabelle. Where they go, who they meet. Discreet." Nate's voice crackled through the phone. "You sure? This is personal, Spence." "Exactly why I trust you." I said, "Start tonight by Friday." Nate delivered photos, timestamps, locations. Troy and Isabelle at a Raleigh hotel, her arm looped through his. Troy meeting a man in a black SUV, cash changing hands. Isabelle at a coffee shop handing an envelope to a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, sharp suit. No name. Nate's report was blunt. "They're moving fast. Whatever they're planning, it's endgame." I studied the photos, Isabelle's smile cutting deeper than any knife. But the woman in the coffee shop nagged at me. I sent her picture to Claire. "Find out who she is," I said. Now. Saturday night, Isabelle claimed another work event. She stood in our bedroom, slipping into a red dress that screamed trouble, her perfume thick, "Big night," she said, adjusting her earrings. "Troy's closing a side deal." "Side deal," I repeated, leaning against the doorframe. "Sounds important." She didn't meet my eyes. "It is." She kissed my cheek, her lips a ghost, and left. I waited until her car vanished, then opened my laptop. Claire's email was waiting. The woman from the coffee shop was Laura Bennett, a corporate lawyer with ties to offshore firms. She'd worked with Troy on past deals, and her firm was auditing First Carolina's merger. The pieces clicked. Troy and Isabelle weren't just stealing. They were rigging the merger to collapse, pocketing the fallout while pinning the blame elsewhere. Laura was their cleaner, tying up loose ends. But they hadn't counted on me. Or Richard. I poured another bourbon, the glass cold in my hand, and called Nate. "I need one more thing," I said. "Richard Harper. What's he digging into?" Nate hesitated. "You're playing with fire, Spence." "Good," I said. "I'm ready to burn." Sunday morning. Nate's report landed. Richard had hired his own investigators sniffing around Troy's accounts. He'd traced the same shell company I had. The old man wasn't protecting Isabelle. He was hunting her too. I leaned back, the study's silence heavy. Richard was a wild card, but he could be my ace. If I played him right, I could take down Troy and Isabelle without firing a shot. That night, I drove to Richard's estate, a sprawling mansion on the edge of Charlotte. He answered the door himself, his eyes narrowing. "Vaughn," he said, voice like gravel. "What do you want?" "5 minutes, I said, holding his gaze. "It's about your daughter." He stepped aside, and I walked in the air, thick with cigar smoke and old money. I laid out the shell company, the transfers, Troy's scheme, enough to hook him, not enough to show my hand. "Isabelle's in deep." I said, "You want to save her? We need to move fast." Richard's face was stone, but his knuckles whitened. "You're telling me my daughter's a crook?" "I'm telling you she's in over her head." I said, "Help me or she goes down with Troy." He stared at me, the clock ticking in the silence. "What's your angle, Vaughn?" "Truth," I said, my voice steady, "and justice." He nodded, slow, like a man sizing up a snake. "I'll think about it." I left the night air sharp against my skin. Richard was on board, or he'd double-cross me. Either way, the game was mine to play. Monday loomed, and with it a boardroom meeting at First Carolina. Troy would be there. Isabelle, too, presenting the merger's final numbers. They thought they were closing the deal. They didn't know I was rewriting the ending. The morning of the meeting. I suited up, charcoal gray, crisp white shirt, no tie. I walked into First Carolina's glass tower, my briefcase heavy with evidence. The boardroom was a sleek cage of mahogany and steel, the city sprawling below. Troy sat at the head, smirking, Isabelle beside him, her smile a polished lie. Richard was there, his eyes unreadable. The other execs buzzed, oblivious to the storm brewing. Troy kicked off, his voice smooth, pitching the merger like a used car salesman. Isabelle backed him, her slides flawless, her confidence unshakable. I waited silent until the room paused for questions. I stood, my voice cutting through the hum. "I have one," I said, locking eyes with Troy. "How do you explain $2 million in transfers to a Cayman shell company?" The room froze. Troy's smirk faltered. Isabelle's pen slipped, clattering on the table. Richard leaned forward, his gaze a blade. I opened my briefcase, sliding a single page across the table, a bank statement highlighted, undeniable. "Care to comment?" I said, my tone ice. Troy laughed too loud. "This is a misunderstanding, Spencer. You're out of your depth." "Am I?" said, sliding another page. "Email logs?" Isabelle's name in bold, her face drained of color, her eyes darting to Troy, then me. The boardroom erupted, voices overlapping, but I stayed calm, my stare pinning Troy like a bug. Richard cleared his throat, his voice low, but lethal. "Wilkins Vaughn, my office." Now we filed out, Isabelle trailing her heels, unsteady. In Richard's office, the air was thick, the skyline mocking us through the glass. Richard didn't sit. "Talk," he said, his eyes on Troy. Troy stammered, deflecting, but I cut him off. "They've been skimming," I said, dropping the full file transfers. "Emails, Laura Bennett's name." Isabelle signed off. "They planned to tank the merger and walk away." "Rich." Isabelle's voice broke. "Spencer, you don't understand." "I understand enough." I said my words. "Steele, you played me. Both of you." Richard turned to his daughter, his face a mask of fury and grief. "Is this true?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. Troy stepped forward, his charm gone. "Harper, let's be reasonable." "Shut up," Richard snapped. He looked at me, his jaw tight. "What do you want, Vaughn?" "Nothing," I said. "Just the truth." I walked out, leaving them to their reckoning. The elevator hummed, carrying me down, but my mind was already racing. This wasn't the end. Isabelle would fight back. She was too cunning not to. And Troy had connections, the kind that don't go quietly. I'd lit the fuse, but the explosion was coming, and I needed to be ready. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing off the chaos of Richard's office. Troy's stammering excuses. Isabelle's silent panic. and Richard's icy fury faded into a dull hum as I descended the glass tower of First Carolina Bank, loomed around me, a monument to greed and secrets. But I felt steady like a man who'd just fired the opening shot in a war he'd already mapped out. My briefcase, heavy with the remaining evidence, was my arsenal. The boardroom had been a spark. Now I'd fan it into a blaze. Back at Vaughn Solutions, I locked my office door and spread the files across my desk. Laura Bennett's name stared back at me from Claire's report: corporate lawyer, offshore ties. The woman Isabelle had met at that coffee shop. She wasn't just cleaning up Troy's mess. She was the architect orchestrating the merger's collapse to funnel millions to her clients. Isabelle and Troy were pawns thinking they were players. I traced her firm's transactions, cross-referencing them with Nate's photos. One caught my eye. Laura handing a USB drive to the man in the black SUV, the same man Troy had met. A new name surfaced in Claire's data: Vincent Cole, a private equity shark with a reputation for torching companies and cashing out. He was the shadow behind Laura, and the merger was his target. My phone buzzed. Nate. "You're not going to like this," he said, his voice rough. "Richard Harper's investigator just got to Laura. They're meeting tonight uptown. If he flips her, your play's done." I gripped the phone, my mind racing. Richard was moving faster than I'd expected, his old banker instincts sharp. If he exposed Laura before I could, he'd control the narrative. Maybe shield Isabelle to save his family's name. I couldn't let that happen. Where I asked midnight rooftop bar at the Sterling, "I'll send you the feed." I hung up the office dark except for the glow of my screen. The Sterling was a sleek members-only spot, perfect for secrets. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the Charlotte skyline, a jagged silhouette against the night. If Richard was closing in, I needed to be there first. The bar was a glass perch above the city, all chrome and low lights, the air thick with cigar smoke and ambition. I slipped in, blending with the crowd bankers' lawyers, the kind of people who'd sell their soul for a corner office. Laura was at a corner table, her sharp suit crisp, her eyes scanning the room. Richard sat across from her, his face unreadable, a whiskey untouched in front of him. I stayed back, nursing a bourbon at the bar, my phone hidden as I streamed Nate's feed, a tiny camera he'd planted nearby. "You've got one chance," Richard said, his voice low, caught clear on the feed. "Tell me everything or I go to the feds tomorrow." Laura's smile was razor thin. "You're out of your depth. Harper, walk away." Richard leaned forward, his eyes like flint. "My daughter's in this." "You think I'll walk?" Laura's composure cracked just for a second. "Isabelle's a small fish. Vincent Cole's the one you want. He's got Troy on a leash and your daughter's just collateral." My pulse spiked. Vincent Cole. The name I'd traced. Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "Proof," he said. Laura slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything you need: accounts, emails, Cole's orders. But if you use it, I'm gone. And so's Isabelle." Richard pocketed the drive, his face stone. "You'll hear from me." I slipped out before they saw me, my heart pounding. Richard had the key to Cole's empire, but he'd use it to save Isabelle, not destroy her. I needed that drive. And I needed Laura. The next twist came faster than I expected. At 2 a.m., Claire called, her voice urgent. "Laura's on the move. She just booked a flight to Miami. One-way leaves in 3 hours. She's running," I said, already grabbing my keys. "Where is she now?" "Her condo packing. Nate's got eyes on her." I drove through Charlotte's empty streets, the city a blur of neon and shadow. Laura's condo was a high-rise in Dilworth, all glass and steel. Nate met me in the parking garage, his face grim. "She's spooked," he said. Richard's call pushed her over the edge. "Get me in," I said. Nate worked his magic, a faked maintenance call to the concierge, and we slipped into the service elevator. Laura's penthouse was on the 20th floor, the door ajar, lights spilling out. I stepped inside, Nate behind me. She was in the living room, shoving papers into a shredder, a suitcase half packed. She froze when she saw me, her eyes wide. "Spencer," she said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I know about Cole," I said, stepping closer. "And I know you're running. Give me the drive you gave Richard, or I call the feds right now." Her laugh was brittle. "You're bluffing. You've got nothing." I pulled out my phone. Nate's footage of her meeting with Richard paused on the screen. "This says otherwise. Hand it over, Laura." She hesitated, then reached into her purse, tossing me a second USB drive. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Cole doesn't lose." "We'll see," I said, pocketing the drive. "Leave town. Don't come back." She glared, but the fight was gone. I left her there, the shredder's hum fading as we hit the elevator. Back in my car, I plugged the drive into my laptop. It was a goldmine. Cole's accounts, his orders to Troy Isabelle's signatures on every dirty deal. But there was more, a memo from Cole to Laura, dated last week. He'd planned to cut Troy and Isabelle loose after the merger collapsed, leaving them to take the fall. Isabelle wasn't just a pawn. She was expendable. I leaned back, the dashboard's glow cold against my face. Isabelle had betrayed me, but she was in deeper than she knew. Part of me wanted to let her drown. But another part, the part that remembered her laugh, her hand in mine, hesitated. I pushed it down. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about justice. The next morning I met Richard at a diner, the kind of place where nobody asks questions. He looked older, the weight of his daughter's betrayal etched into his face. I slid the USB drive across the table. "Everything on Cole," I said. "Use it or I will." He studied me, his eyes searching. "Why not do it yourself?" "Because you've got more to lose," I said. "And I'm done cleaning up her messes." He nodded, pocketing the drive. "You're a cold bastard. Vaughn. Learn from the best," I said, meeting his gaze. Richard acted fast. By noon, the feds were at First Carolina seizing Troy's office. He was let out in cuffs, his smirk gone, reporters swarming like vultures. Isabelle wasn't with him. She'd vanished, her office empty, her phone off. I didn't look for her. She'd made her choice. The merger collapsed. First Carolina's stock tanked, and Vincent Cole's name hit the headlines. Richard's evidence had cracked the case wide open, but he kept Isabelle's name out of it. I didn't know if it was love or pride, and I didn't care. My firm weathered the storm. Clients trusted me, and new ones came knocking. Vaughn Solutions was stronger than ever. Weeks later, I got a letter. No return address, just Isabelle's handwriting. "I'm sorry," it read. "I thought I was saving us. I was wrong." No explanation. No plea. I burned it in the backyard, the flames licking the night sky. Her apology was ash. Like our marriage, I sold the house. Moved to a loft downtown, closer to the pulse of the city. The Mustang stayed a reminder of who I was before her. One night, I sat at the Oak Room, the same bar where it all unraveled, a bourbon in hand. Claire joined me, her eyes sharp but warm. "You did what you had to," she said. "Did I asked, staring into the glass. "Or did I just trade one cage for another?" She didn't answer, just clinked her glass against mine. The bar hummed around us. Deals being made, secrets traded. I'd won, but the victory was hollow. Isabelle was gone. Troy was ruined. Cole was cornered. Yet here I was alone, the king of a kingdom I hadn't wanted. I walked out into the Charlotte night, the air crisp, the skyline alive. I'd torn down their empire. But what had I built, a legacy or a shadow? I didn't know. Maybe I never would. Like what you heard? Hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments. And subscribe to Viora, because the next story might just be your favorite one yet.